There is a hunger that does not live in the stomach. It does not growl. It does not ache in obvious ways. It does not send you searching through cabinets at midnight. And yet, it is always there. A quiet signal beneath everything you do, every post, every ambition, every argument, every silence. There is a hunger that lives deeper than appetite. A hunger to be seen, not glanced at, not observed, seen, recognized, understood. There was a time when being seen meant survival. To be visible to your tribe was to belong. To belong was to live. To be ignored was to disappear. The human nervous system has not forgotten this. Even now, in a world of screens and signals, the body still measures visibility as safety, a notification, a reply, a name spoken in a room, a seat saved at a table, small signals. But biologically, they are enormous because hunger is not weakness. Hunger is information. And tonight, we enter a dimension most people feel, but rarely name, the hunger dimension, where appetite is not about food, but about meaning, where starvation does not always look like emptiness. Sometimes it looks like overachievement, sometimes like performance, sometimes like isolation dressed as independence. You have felt it, that moment when you speak and no one truly hears you, that moment when you achieve something and the room stays quiet, that moment when you are surrounded by people but feel invisible. This is not drama, it is wiring. The brain processes social rejection in the same regions that process physical pain. The body does not distinguish cleanly between a wound to the skin and a wound to belonging. And so we adapt. We curate, we compete, we perform, we withdraw, all in search of the same thing, recognition, to be acknowledged as real. But here is the question. What happens when we mistake attention for nourishment? What happens when visibility becomes performance? What happens when the hunger to be seen is fed, but never satisfied? This broadcast is not here to fix you. It is here to explore you, to examine the architecture of hunger without judgment, to understand what the human spirit is starving for and what truly nourishes it. This is not a cooking show. This is not a self-help lecture. This is an exploration of appetite, of identity, of belonging. Welcome to Retro Anime Kitchen. Welcome to the Hunger Dimension broadcast. Tonight, we begin with the hunger to be seen. And so we begin. If the hunger to be seen is real, then it must leave evidence in the body. It does. Long before language, long before performance, long before identity. The human brain evolved around visibility. In early human groups, being seen meant protection. It meant access to food. It meant shared warmth. It meant information. To be excluded from the group was not merely uncomfortable, it was dangerous. And the nervous system remembers this, even now. When someone ignores your message, when your voice is interrupted, when your effort goes unacknowledged, the anterior cingulate cortex activates, the same region associated with physical pain. The body reacts, heart rate shifts, cortisol rises, muscles tighten. You do not merely feel overlooked, you feel threatened. This is why social hunger can feel urgent, why validation feels relieving, why recognition feels warm. Because recognition regulates the nervous system. It signals, you are safe here, and safety is nourishment. This is where the metaphor becomes biological. Warm food has been shown to activate neural pathways associated with trust and bonding. Physical warmth and social warmth are processed in overlapping regions of the brain. This is not poetry. This is wiring. When someone hands you a bowl of soup in a moment of grief, your body does not just receive calories. It receives regulation. It receives proof that you are not alone. So when you hunger to be seen, you are not craving applause. You are craving nervous system stability. You are craving acknowledgement as a signal of belonging. But here is where distortion begins. In modern life, attention is abundant. Recognition is manufactured. Visibility is amplified. And yet, satisfaction remains rare, because attention is not the same as attunement. Attention says, I notice you. Attunement says, I understand you. And the body can tell the difference. This is why thousands of views can still feel empty, why applause can fade quickly, why achievement can feel strangely hollow. Because hunger is not satisfied by volume, it is satisfied by resonance. And resonance requires depth. This is where many people become confused. They chase visibility when what they need is connection. They chase reaction when what they need is regulation. They chase audience when what they need is witness. The hunger dimension is not loud, it is subtle. It hides inside productivity. It hides inside charisma. It hides inside independence. It whispers, see me. And sometimes it whispers louder, see me correctly. Now, consider this. What have you done to be seen? What have you built, curated, withheld, performed, and did it nourish you? Or did it only feed the hunger temporarily? This is not accusation. This is observation. Because hunger is not an enemy. It is guidance. It tells you where something essential is missing. And when you listen closely, you may discover that what you are starving for has less to do with exposure and more to do with intimacy. Tonight, we do not eliminate hunger. We decode it. And next, we examine what happens when the hunger to be seen turns into performance. And now we move deeper, because the hunger to be seen does not always stay honest. At first it feels simple. It feels like wanting acknowledgement. It feels like wanting warmth. It feels like wanting another person to meet your eyes and recognize you without hesitation. But when that hunger goes unmet for long enough, it changes form. It adapts. It learns strategy. It turns into performance. Performance is not deception. It is protection. In early human environments, amplification increased survival. Louder signals were noticed. Stronger gestures were remembered. Expressive faces suggested vitality. The body learned that visibility increased safety. So we amplify. We shape personality. We refine presentation. We polish tone. We design relatability. Not always consciously, often automatically. Because the nervous system is not asking whether something is authentic. It is asking whether it secures belonging. And sometimes performance succeeds. It attracts attention. It produces reaction. It generates feedback. But feedback is not nourishment. Consider sugar. Sugar activates reward centers rapidly. Dopamine rises. The effect feels immediate, but it does not sustain. It creates a cycle. More stimulus, more response, more consumption. Relief appears briefly, then disappears. This is how visibility becomes compulsive, not because attention is harmful, but because intermittent reinforcement is powerful. When recognition arrives unpredictably, dopamine spikes higher. The same mechanism drives gambling. The same mechanism drives scrolling. The same mechanism keeps the hunger active. You publish. You wait, you refresh, you measure, you interpret, you adjust. The behavior becomes ritual. Gradually the hunger mutates. It stops asking to be seen. It starts asking to be approved. Eventually it asks not to be forgotten. This is where fatigue enters. Performance consumes energy. Constant amplification disrupts regulation. You can be widely visible and internally unstable. You can be publicly praised and privately depleted. Attunement cannot be mass-produced. It is relational. It requires depth. It requires presence. It requires time. And time rarely trends. So the system accelerates. More output, more expression, more proof of existence. The hunger expands. This is not weakness. It is biology interacting with modern stimulus. And here is the quiet truth. The hunger to be seen is not satisfied by scale. It is satisfied by precision, not by being watched, by being accurately understood. Understanding cannot be optimized. It must be experienced. So if performance cannot fully nourish the hunger, what can? That is where we turn next. If performance cannot fully nourish the hunger, what can? The answer is not silence. The answer is not withdrawal. The answer is not abandoning visibility. The answer is precision. Real nourishment does not come from being widely observed. It comes from being accurately perceived. There is a difference between exposure and resonance. Exposure spreads outward. Resonance moves inward. Exposure gathers attention. Resonance builds regulation. The nervous system relaxes when it feels understood, not agreed with, not applauded, understood. When someone mirrors your internal state correctly, the body shifts. Breathing slows. Muscles soften. The mind becomes less defensive. This is not metaphor. This is co-regulation. The human body calibrates through attuned presence. In early communities, nourishment was shared in proximity. Food was not consumed alone. It was prepared together, passed hand to hand, eaten within sight of others. This ritual was not only about calories, it was about synchronization, chewing in rhythm, speaking between bites, sharing warmth across distance. Modern life separates consumption from connection. We eat while scrolling. We speak while distracted. We gather while divided. The hunger increases because the ritual dissolves, and yet the blueprint remains. Nourishment requires three conditions: presence, accuracy, reciprocity. Presence means attention without performance. Accuracy means being seen without distortion. Reciprocity means exchange, not exhibition. This is why one honest conversation can feel more satisfying than thousands of views. Why a single moment of recognition can quiet weeks of noise. Why depth nourishes longer than scale. The hunger to be seen does not disappear. It refines. It becomes the hunger to be known. And being known requires risk. It requires revealing something unpolished, something unfinished, something not optimized. This is where many hesitate, because authenticity without guarantee feels dangerous. But safety is not built through control. It is built through attunement. And attunement cannot happen at a distance. It happens in shared presence, in real listening, in unedited response, in moments that do not trend. So the question shifts again. Not how do I become more visible, but where am I accurately received? Not how do I amplify further, but who regulates me when I speak? Because the body keeps score, and it knows the difference between attention and nourishment. The hunger dimension is not about eliminating appetite. It is about refining what feeds it. And now we move deeper still, because there is another layer beneath visibility, beneath performance, beneath recognition, a quieter hunger, the hunger for meaning. And that is where we go next. The hunger for meaning is quieter than the hunger to be seen. It does not demand applause. It does not ask for reaction. It asks for coherence. Meaning is the sense that your effort connects to something larger than survival. It is the feeling that your actions are not random, that your pain is not wasted, that your existence is not accidental noise. The brain is a pattern-seeking organ. It constantly tries to link cause and effect, experience and outcome, action and significance. When those links feel broken, distress increases. When effort feels disconnected from impact, fatigue deepens. This is why achievement alone does not satisfy. Achievement answers the question, did I succeed? Meaning, answers the question, did it matter? These are not the same question. You can succeed and still feel empty. You can be praised and still feel misplaced, because the nervous system wants safety, but the psyche wants direction. You did not simply eat. You participated in continuity. Modern acceleration disrupts that continuity. Tasks are completed quickly. Content is consumed instantly. Work is optimized relentlessly, but optimization removes narrative. And without narrative, meaning thins. The hunger for meaning intensifies when life feels fragmented, when roles shift too quickly, when identity feels modular, when attention is divided across dozens of signals. The mind asks, what is this for? What am I building? Where does this lead? Meaning is constructed through integration. It requires reflection. It requires connecting past experience to present action. It requires imagining future contribution. When those threads align, something stabilizes internally. Not excitement, not validation, orientation. Orientation reduces anxiety because the brain tolerates difficulty better when it understands purpose. Pain with meaning is survivable. Pain without meaning feels chaotic. This is why rituals matter, why traditions persist, why stories endure. They organize experience. They create continuity. They turn isolated moments into sequence. And sequence creates direction. The hunger dimension is not only about visibility, it is about orientation. To be seen regulates the body. To belong regulates the nervous system. To find meaning regulates the self. And when meaning erodes, performance increases. Because distraction is easier than integration. Constant stimulation postpones existential questioning, but it does not resolve it. So the hunger remains. Subtle, persistent, sometimes disguised as restlessness, sometimes disguised as ambition, sometimes disguised as burnout. The hunger for meaning asks a different question. Not who sees me, but why am I here? Not how am I perceived, but what am I participating in? And that question cannot be answered through metrics. It requires reflection. It requires stillness. It requires stepping outside of performance long enough to examine trajectory. This is where many resist, because stillness exposes uncertainty, and uncertainty feels destabilizing. But uncertainty is not absence, it is space. And space is where meaning is constructed. The hunger for meaning is not dramatic, it is architectural. It asks you to build coherence, to align effort with value, to align action with principle, to align consumption with intention. And when that alignment begins, something subtle shifts. The hunger softens, not because it disappears, but because it becomes directional. It becomes compass instead of craving. And that is a different kind of nourishment. A compass does not remove hunger, it refines it. Craving pulls without direction. A compass points. When hunger becomes directional, it stops scattering your energy across every available stimulus. It begins to narrow your focus. You no longer chase every signal. You begin to evaluate. Does this align? Does this move me forward? Does this build something that lasts? This is the quiet shift from consumption to construction, from reaction to intention, from noise to signal. The hunger dimension is not only about what you lack, it is about what you choose to build in response to that lack. When hunger is unconscious, it drives impulsively. When hunger is examined, it informs deliberately. This is the difference between appetite and agency. Appetite reacts, agency selects, and selection is power. You cannot eliminate hunger, but you can decide what feeds it. You can decide which environments amplify it. You can decide which rituals regulate it. You can decide which relationships stabilize it. Every organism responds to its environment. Change the input and the output shifts. If your diet consists of comparison, urgency, and performance, hunger accelerates. If your diet includes depth, reflection, and presence, hunger recalibrates. This is not about isolation. It is about curation, not of image, but of intake. What conversations do you return to? What ideas do you revisit? What spaces allow your nervous system to soften? Where are you most regulated? Where are you most reactive? Enough recognition, enough stimulation, enough output, enough noise, enough proof. The modern world rarely asks what is sufficient. It asks what is next. But sufficiency stabilizes, and stability allows depth. Depth allows meaning. Meaning reduces chaos, and chaos reduction is nourishment. This is not minimalism, it is calibration. The hunger dimension is not a place of deprivation, it is a place of examination, where appetite is studied. And once you begin to notice the difference, performance softens. Noise decreases. Intention strengthens. Not dramatically, gradually. And gradual change is sustainable. This is the deeper layer. Not how do I remove hunger, but how do I orient it? Because orientation transforms hunger from liability into navigation. And navigation is survival refined. Navigation changes how you move, but it does not change the terrain. And the terrain of modern life is engineered to stimulate appetite. Every platform competes for attention. Every notification interrupts stillness. Every algorithm studies your impulses. This is not conspiracy. It is commerce. Attention has become currency, and hunger has become profitable. When systems are designed to amplify craving, self-regulation becomes more difficult. The nervous system was built for scarcity. It now lives in abundance. Abundance of stimulus, abundance of comparison, abundance of visibility, but not abundance of attunement. And so hunger intensifies, not because you are broken, but because your environment is persuasive. Persuasive design leverages psychology, variable reward schedules, endless scroll mechanics, social comparison loops. These are not accidental, they are optimized. When hunger meets optimization, impulse accelerates. You begin to consume faster than you integrate. You respond faster than you reflect. You react before you orient. And orientation is what prevents fragmentation. Fragmentation is the quiet cost of overstimulation. Too many signals, too many identities, too many roles, too many performances. When the self is constantly adjusting, coherence weakens. And when coherence weakens, hunger spreads. It no longer feels specific. It feels generalized. Restlessness without clarity. Fatigue without cause. Ambition without satisfaction. This is architectural hunger. Not a single unmet need, but a structure that keeps appetite activated. To navigate this terrain, awareness is insufficient. Ritual must return. Not ritual as nostalgia, ritual as regulation. Structured pauses, intentional intake, deliberate silence. The nervous system recalibrates through repetition, through predictable anchors, through embodied routines. This is why morning rituals matter, why shared meals matter, why consistent sleep matters, why conversation without devices matters. Because repetition builds safety, and safety reduces compulsive hunger. When safety increases, appetite slows, and when appetite slows, choice expands. Choice is the hidden layer of nourishment. You cannot choose clearly when overstimulated, You cannot orient when constantly interrupted. You cannot integrate when always reacting. The hunger dimension does not condemn technology, it examines velocity. Speed without reflection produces distortion. Reflection without action produces stagnation. Integration requires both. Consume, pause, process, choose, build. That sequence restores coherence. When coherence strengthens, hunger refines again. It becomes less about external confirmation and more about internal alignment. Internal alignment feels quiet, not explosive, not dramatic, quiet. And quiet can feel unfamiliar, especially if you have equated intensity with aliveness. But intensity is not depth. Intensity is stimulation. Depth is integration. The difference matters. When you begin to notice that difference, you start regulating differently. You start selecting environments differently. You start interacting differently. You start consuming differently. Not because you were told to, because your compass sharpens, and sharpened orientation reduces noise. Noise reduction increases clarity. Clarity stabilizes direction. Direction reduces chaos. This is how navigation becomes nourishment, not through elimination of hunger, through calibration of response. And calibration requires repetition, small adjustments repeated daily. Over time, hunger shifts from master to messenger, from impulse to indicator, from pressure to information. And information is usable. When hunger becomes usable, it becomes power, not loud power, stable power. And stable power builds slowly, which is why it lasts. Stability changes something important. It slows perception. When the nervous system is no longer reacting constantly, awareness expands. And in that expanded awareness, something else becomes visible. The body remembers, not only events, not only injuries. The body remembers conditions, conditions of safety, conditions of threat, conditions of connection, conditions of absence. Long before language develops, the human organism learns through pattern, a caregiver's voice, the rhythm of footsteps in a room, the temperature of a hand on your shoulder, the delay between distress and response. These patterns become the nervous system's earliest map of the world. Is it safe? Is it unpredictable? Is it attentive? Is it distant? The answers are not written in thought. They are written in sensation, heart rate, breathing rhythm, muscle tension, micro adjustments of posture. This is why hunger often feels physical before it becomes emotional. The body signals before the mind explains. A tightening in the chest, a restless energy in the limbs, an impulse to reach for distraction. These are not random reactions. They are memory activating. When earlier needs were met consistently, the nervous system learns regulation. Distress rises, response arrives, balance returns. But when response was inconsistent, delayed, or absent, the body learns a different pattern. It learns vigilance. It learns anticipation. It learns that safety is uncertain. This is not blame. It is imprint. Every organism records the environments that shaped its survival. Over time, those recordings become expectation. Expectation becomes perception. Perception becomes behavior. And behavior begins to repeat the original pattern. This is how hunger travels through time. A child who struggled to be noticed may become an adult who amplifies visibility. A child who learned unpredictability may become an adult who scans constantly for threat. A child who received conditional attention may grow into an adult who performs for approval. None of these responses are irrational. They are adaptive solutions. Solutions created by a nervous system attempting to stabilize itself. But adaptation can become habit, and habit can outlive the environment that created it. which is why someone may feel restless even in safety, why silence may feel uncomfortable even in peace, why stillness may feel unfamiliar even when nothing is wrong. The body remembers older conditions. It continues preparing for them. This is one reason the hunger to be seen can feel urgent. It is not only social, it is physiological. Recognition becomes evidence that the environment is safe, that you exist within someone else's awareness, that you are not invisible to the tribe. And invisibility once meant vulnerability. So the body scans, it watches faces, it measures tone, it notices delays in response. These calculations happen beneath conscious awareness. They are ancient processes, survival systems refined over thousands of years. Modern life introduces a complication. Signals arrive constantly, but attunement arrives rarely. Messages appear, notifications trigger, voices respond, but the body still searches for deeper cues. Eye contact, tone stability, emotional accuracy, shared presence. Without those signals, the nervous system continues searching, and searching sustains hunger. This is why digital attention often feels incomplete. It registers as contact, but not always as connection. The body senses the difference, not intellectually, somatically. This is also why certain experiences feel disproportionately powerful. A calm conversation, a moment of genuine listening, a meal shared without distraction, a hand placed gently on your back when you are overwhelmed. These signals are ancient. They speak the nervous system's original language: safety, presence, attunement. When these signals appear, something quiet happens internally. Signals the body continues searching for, not because it is broken, but because it is intelligent. It remembers what nourishment once felt like, and it keeps looking for it. Understanding this changes how we interpret hunger. Instead of asking what is wrong with me, we begin asking what conditions shape this response? What environments train this reflex? What signals did my body learn to search for? These questions replace judgment with curiosity. Curiosity opens observation. Observation restores agency. When patterns become visible, behavior becomes adjustable, not through force, through awareness. Awareness creates space between impulse and action, and in that space, something powerful becomes possible. Choice. Many people believe behavior changes through discipline alone, but discipline without awareness often becomes tension, and tension rarely sustains transformation. The nervous system changes through experience, through repeated signals that contradict older expectations. When safety appears consistently, vigilance slowly decreases. When attention arrives without conditions, performance relaxes. When presence replaces evaluation, the body begins to settle. These changes rarely happen dramatically. They unfold gradually, because the nervous system learns through repetition. Through moments that say, "Nothing is wrong. You are safe enough here. You do not have to perform to remain visible." Signals like this accumulate over time, and when they do, the body begins updating its map of the world. Old predictions weaken, new predictions form. The system recalibrates. This is the quiet science of recalibration. Not fixing, not erasing, recalibrating. And when the system recalibrates, hunger changes again. It becomes less urgent, less chaotic, more interpretable. Which brings us to the next layer of the hunger dimension. The hunger that lives between bodies. The hunger for connection. Connection is often misunderstood. Many people believe it simply means being around others, but proximity is not the same as connection. Crowds can still feel lonely. Rooms full of voices can still feel silent. Because connection is not measured by how many people are present, It is measured by how accurately two nervous systems meet. Connection is a biological exchange, not just conversation. When two people feel genuinely understood, something measurable happens inside the body. Breathing patterns synchronize. Heart rhythms begin to align. Muscle tension decreases. The nervous system recognizes safety. This process is called co-regulation. Long before humans could explain emotions, they regulated each other through presence, a calm voice, a steady gaze, a reassuring touch. Signals like these told the body something essential. You are not facing the world alone. This is why isolation affects the body so strongly. Loneliness is not simply emotional discomfort, it is a regulatory deficit. When the nervous system lacks attuned interaction, it begins to operate in self-protection, alert, scanning, guarded, not because something is wrong, because something is missing. Human beings evolved as cooperative organisms. Survival depended on shared awareness, shared labor, shared protection. Connection was not optional, it was infrastructure. The modern world complicates this. We are more connected technologically than any generation before us. Messages travel instantly. Images cross continents. Voices appear from thousands of miles away. Yet the nervous system still searches for older signals. Eye contact, uninterrupted attention, tone that reflects understanding, presence without performance. These signals cannot be compressed easily into digital form. So people experience a strange contradiction, endless communication, but incomplete connection. This is why someone can receive thousands of reactions online and still feel unseen. Attention is plentiful. Attunement is rare. Attunement requires patience. It requires curiosity. It requires the willingness to slow down long enough to notice another person's internal world. And when that happens, something stabilizes. The body stops performing. It begins participating. Participation is very different from presentation. Presentation asks, how am I appearing? Participation asks, what are we experiencing together? Connection thrives in participation, not performance. When people feel safe enough to participate honestly, hunger changes again. It becomes less about being noticed and more about being understood. This is why one sincere conversation can feel more nourishing than hours of social exposure. Why laughter shared between friends can calm the body more than applause from strangers. Why silence between people who trust each other can feel comfortable instead of awkward. Because connection is not constant stimulation, it is mutual regulation. The body senses when another nervous system is steady, when another presence is attentive, when another mind is curious rather than evaluative. These signals create something rare in modern life: relational safety. And relational safety allows something important to emerge: authenticity. Not the performed version, not the curated version, the unguarded version. This is where connection becomes transformative. Because when people feel safe enough to show their unedited selves, they stop performing survival strategies. They start revealing who they actually are. And when two people meet in that space, hunger softens again. Not completely, but noticeably. Because the body recognizes something ancient. Recognition without performance. Presence without evaluation. Understanding without pressure. These moments remind the nervous system of what nourishment once felt like. And when nourishment is remembered, something remarkable happens. The body begins trusting connection again. The hunger for connection softens something inside the body, but it does not answer every question. Because beyond connection, another layer of hunger begins to surface. A quieter one, a slower one. The hunger for legacy. Legacy is often misunderstood. Many people think of legacy as fame, as recognition that lasts beyond a lifetime. But legacy is not about being remembered by everyone. It is about leaving something that continues to matter, something that outlives the moment in which it was created. Human beings are uniquely aware of time. We know that our lives have limits. We know that our presence in the world is temporary, and this awareness changes how we experience meaning. Because once survival is stable, once connection is possible, the mind begins asking a different question. What remains after me? This question does not always appear consciously. Sometimes it appears as ambition, sometimes as creativity, sometimes as the desire to teach, sometimes as the impulse to build something that lasts. A story, a family, an idea, a movement, a body of work. All of these are expressions of the same instinct, the instinct to extend meaning beyond a single lifetime. Legacy is not only about the future, it is about continuity, about becoming part of a chain of influence. The meals your grandparents prepared, the songs someone taught you when you were young, the advice that changed how you see the world. These things are legacy. They are pieces of one life that continue shaping another. Long after the original moment has passed, human culture is built from accumulated legacy, knowledge passed forward, wisdom refined across generations, stories preserved so that experience does not disappear. In this sense, legacy is a form of nourishment. It feeds the future. It stabilizes communities. It allows lessons learned through hardship to benefit those who come later. Without legacy, every generation would start from the same uncertainty. Every mistake would be repeated from the beginning. Every discovery would be temporary. Legacy prevents that reset. It transforms individual experience into collective knowledge. This is why the desire to contribute can feel so powerful, because contribution is legacy in motion. It is the moment when something you create begins influencing someone else. Sometimes that influence is small, a sentence that changes a person's perspective, a meal that comforts someone during a difficult day, a conversation that helps another person feel understood. Legacy does not require scale, it requires sincerity, because impact spreads through resonance, not through volume. A quiet truth shared at the right moment can travel further than 1,000 loud statements. This is why meaning deepens when people feel their work matters. Not because it produces attention, because it produces continuation. Something moves forward, something evolves, something becomes possible that did not exist before. And when the human mind recognizes that possibility, motivation changes. The question is no longer, how do I get more? The question becomes, what can I build that lasts? This shift changes how hunger behaves, because the hunger for legacy is not satisfied by consumption. It is satisfied by contribution, by creating something that becomes useful beyond the self, something that participates in the unfolding story of human life. When people find ways to contribute meaningfully, something stabilizes internally. Not excitement, not applause. Purpose. Purpose anchors effort. It transforms difficulty into investment. It transforms time into construction. And construction reduces existential anxiety. Because when a person feels they are building something meaningful, time no longer feels like loss. It feels like progress. This is why legacy often emerges later in life, as people accumulate experience, as they begin asking what should be preserved, what should be improved, what should be passed forward. But legacy does not have to wait for age. It begins the moment you choose to create something that benefits others. An insight, a piece of art, a method, a story, a system, a community. Every act of creation is a message to the future. It says, something learned here is worth carrying forward. And when enough people contribute those messages, civilization advances, not through isolated brilliance, through accumulated wisdom. This is the deepest layer of the hunger dimension. The recognition that hunger is not only personal, it is generational. Each person inherits the work of those before them, and each person leaves something behind for those who follow. Understanding this changes how we see our own lives, because life stops being a race for attention and starts becoming participation in a much longer story, a story that did not begin with us and will not end with us. Which means the question of hunger changes once again. Not what am I missing, not who is noticing me, but what am I leaving behind? Up to this point, we have explored hunger through several layers. The hunger to be seen, the hunger for connection, the hunger for meaning, the hunger for legacy. Each of these appetites feels different on the surface, but beneath them, something unifies them. They are all signals pointing toward the same deeper human need: integration. Human beings are not designed to live as fragmented systems. The body seeks coherence, the mind seeks narrative, the nervous system seeks safety, and the spirit seeks direction. When these elements align, life begins to feel organized instead of chaotic. But when they separate, hunger multiplies, because fragmentation produces confusion. One part of you may chase attention, another part may crave solitude, one part may seek recognition, another part may seek purpose. When these impulses conflict, energy scatters. The result is exhaustion, not because the person lacks discipline, because the system lacks alignment. This is why understanding hunger matters. Each hunger we explored is not an enemy, it is information. The hunger to be seen tells you that your existence seeks recognition. The hunger for connection tells you that your nervous system requires attunement. The hunger for meaning tells you that your mind seeks coherence. The hunger for legacy tells you that your life seeks continuation. None of these drives are flaws. They are navigation tools. But when they operate unconsciously, they compete with one another. You might chase attention that does not produce connection. You might pursue achievement that does not create meaning. You might build visibility that does not contribute to legacy. This is the modern dilemma. Abundance of opportunity, but confusion of direction. Integration solves this. Integration means aligning the hungers instead of suppressing them. Visibility used to communicate truth. Connection used to stabilize the nervous system. Meaning used to orient effort. Legacy used to guide creation. When these layers begin supporting each other, hunger transforms. It stops feeling chaotic. It begins feeling purposeful. Energy no longer scatters across every available stimulus. It concentrates, like light passing through a lens. Focus replaces noise. Direction replaces urgency. And urgency is one of the quiet distortions of modern life. Urgency makes everything feel equally important. Every notification, every reaction, every opportunity. But urgency rarely produces meaning. Clarity does. Clarity emerges when you step back long enough to observe your own patterns. What drives you? What drains you? What nourishes you? What destabilizes you? The hunger dimension is not about eliminating appetite. It is about mapping it, seeing the architecture clearly enough to choose how you respond. Once you see the full map, something changes. You stop reacting to every signal. You begin navigating intentionally. Some invitations you decline, some environments you leave, some pursuits you deepen, because they align with the direction your compass has revealed. And the moment that alignment begins, hunger changes again. It becomes quieter, more focused, more useful. Not because the world becomes simpler, because you become clearer. Clarity is a form of nourishment. It reduces internal conflict. It allows energy to move forward instead of sideways. And forward movement generates something rare in modern life. Momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence stabilizes action. Action builds meaning. Meaning feeds legacy. And legacy reconnects the individual to something larger than themselves. This is the full map of hunger, not a single appetite, but an ecosystem, a living system of signals guiding human behavior. The question is not whether hunger exists, it always will. The question is whether you are being driven by it, or learning how to navigate with it. And that distinction changes everything. The modern world rarely teaches the concept of enough. Instead, it teaches acceleration, more output, more growth, more visibility, more accumulation, more reaction, more movement. At first, this can feel energizing. Progress feels exciting. Expansion feels validating. The promise of more creates momentum. But momentum without reflection can become its own form of hunger. Because if there is never a moment where something is considered sufficient, the nervous system never receives a signal of completion. And without completion, the body remains in pursuit, always leaning forward, always scanning, always asking the same quiet question. What comes next? This question is not harmful by itself. Curiosity drives exploration. Ambition drives development. But when the question of what comes next replaces the question of what is enough, hunger becomes endless. Endless hunger creates fatigue, not physical fatigue alone, existential fatigue. The sense that effort never arrives anywhere, that no matter how much is achieved, something remains unfinished. This is why people can reach milestones that once felt impossible and still feel restless. Because the body has not been taught how to recognize sufficiency. It only recognizes pursuit. Sufficiency is not stagnation, it is stabilization. It is the moment when the nervous system receives a signal that says, "This moment is complete. You may rest here." Completion allows integration. The mind processes experience. The body releases tension. The nervous system recalibrates. Without completion, life becomes a series of unfinished loops, tasks stacked on tasks, goals stacked on goals, achievements stacked on expectations. And when everything is stacked, nothing feels resolved. The quiet power of enough interrupts this cycle. Enough does not mean the end of growth. It means the recognition of arrival within a moment, a conversation that felt real, a meal that satisfied hunger, a piece of work that expressed something honest, a moment of connection that did not require performance. These moments may seem small, but they stabilize the human system, because the body needs signals of completion, signals that say, something meaningful happened here. You do not have to keep searching right now. In cultures that preserve ritual, these signals appear frequently. Meals end with gratitude. Work ends with acknowledgement. Days end with reflection. These rituals tell the nervous system that effort has meaning, and meaning creates closure. Closure reduces anxiety, because the mind is no longer chasing unfinished questions. Modern life rarely provides closure automatically. Information never stops. Work rarely ends completely. Conversations continue across devices and time zones. Attention is pulled forward continuously, which means the practice of enough must become intentional, not dramatic, not performative, intentional. Pausing long enough to recognize what has already occurred, what has already been built, what has already been shared, what has already been experienced. These recognitions regulate hunger. They do not eliminate appetite, but they remind the system that nourishment has already taken place. The body learns to trust that satisfaction is possible. Without that trust, the nervous system keeps chasing stimulation. more input, more novelty, more distraction. But when sufficiency is recognized regularly, appetite becomes calmer, more deliberate, more discerning. This is the quiet power of enough. It restores rhythm, effort, completion, rest, reflection, then effort again. Human beings evolved within cycles like this: seasons, harvest, day and night, work and rest. These rhythms regulated both body and mind, but when rhythm disappears, appetite loses its boundaries. Everything begins to feel urgent, everything begins to feel unfinished. Enough restores boundary, not a wall, a rhythm, a place where experience can land, where effort can settle, where the nervous system can breathe. Because breathing space is not empty, it is integration. Integration turns experience into wisdom. Without it, life becomes noise. With it, life becomes direction. And direction transforms hunger again, not into silence, but into clarity. Clarity about when to continue, and clarity about when something is already enough. Attention is one of the most powerful forces shaping human experience. Not because attention changes the external world directly, but because attention determines what parts of the world enter your awareness. And whatever enters awareness begins shaping perception. Perception shapes interpretation. Interpretation shapes emotion. Emotion shapes behavior. Behavior shapes life. In this way, attention quietly influences everything that follows. Most people assume they control their attention, but in modern environments, attention is constantly competed for. Notifications interrupt focus. Feeds update endlessly. Algorithms present stimuli designed to capture curiosity. Each signal asks the same silent question: will you look here? Every time attention moves, energy moves with it. Thought begins forming around the object of focus. Emotion begins responding to the interpretation of that object. Behavior begins adjusting to the emotional state that follows. And most of this occurs automatically, because the human brain evolved to notice novelty, sudden movement, unexpected information, potential threat, potential opportunity. These signals once helped humans survive. They helped early communities detect danger, locate resources, observe patterns in the environment. But in modern digital spaces, novelty is constant. Signals never stop, which means attention can be pulled continuously without conscious intention. This creates a subtle form of fragmentation. You begin one thought, another signal interrupts, you begin another task, another message appears, your focus moves again. Piece by piece, attention becomes scattered across dozens of small stimuli, each one incomplete, each one unresolved. The mind adapts by shortening its cycles of focus. Shorter attention, faster scanning, quicker reactions. This adaptation makes navigation possible in busy environments, but it also reduces depth, because depth requires sustained attention. To understand something fully, the mind must remain with it long enough to observe layers, patterns, connections, meaning. Without sustained attention, understanding remains shallow. Information passes through quickly, but little integrates. This is why the discipline of attention matters. Attention is not only a passive response, it can become an intentional practice, a choice about what receives your focus, what deserves your mental energy, what deserves your emotional investment. This discipline is not about eliminating distractions entirely. Distraction is part of modern life, but discipline introduces awareness. You begin noticing where attention is pulled, where it lingers, where it drains energy, where it produces clarity. Once you observe these patterns, something changes. Attention becomes selective, not rigid, selective. Instead of responding to every signal, you begin evaluating signals. Does this deserve my focus? Does this deepen understanding? Does this align with the direction I am building? Or is this simply another stimulus competing for reaction? These questions slow the automatic cycle of attention, and slowing attention restores depth. Depth restores comprehension. Comprehension restores orientation, because when you understand something clearly, you know how to respond to it. Confusion dissolves, clarity appears, and clarity stabilizes behavior. This is why attention is sometimes called the currency of consciousness. Where attention goes, life unfolds. Relationships deepen where attention is present. Ideas develop where attention is sustained. Skills improve where attention is practiced. And meaning grows where attention is directed with intention. When attention is scattered constantly, life can begin to feel fragmented. Moments blur together. Days pass quickly. Experiences feel shallow. But when attention becomes disciplined, something subtle changes. Time begins to feel fuller. Moments feel more vivid. Experiences integrate more deeply. This does not require dramatic lifestyle changes. It begins with simple awareness, noticing when attention drifts, gently returning focus, choosing moments of depth over endless scanning. The discipline of attention is not about control. It is about stewardship. You are the caretaker of your own awareness, and the quality of your attention shapes the quality of your experience. This is not a philosophical abstraction, it is neurological reality. Neural pathways strengthen where attention repeatedly lands. Thought patterns reinforce where focus consistently returns, which means the direction of attention slowly constructs the architecture of the mind. This realization carries responsibility, but it also carries freedom. Because if attention completely, the world remains unpredictable. But perception becomes more stable, reaction becomes more deliberate, and direction becomes clearer. This is the discipline of attention, not perfection, practice, moment by moment, choice by choice, signal by signal, until awareness itself becomes an instrument of navigation. And when attention stabilizes, hunger changes again, because clarity reduces noise. Noise reduction reveals meaning, and meaning restores direction. No organism develops in isolation. Every living system evolves within an environment. Plants grow towards sunlight. Animals adapt to terrain. Human beings adapt to influence. Influence is the invisible architecture shaping perception, the conversations you hear, the ideas repeated around you, the ecology of influence. An ecosystem made of people, information, expectations, and feedback. Most of this ecosystem operates quietly, not through force, through repetition. What you encounter repeatedly begins to feel familiar. What feels familiar begins to feel normal, and what feels normal begins to guide behavior. This process happens long before conscious analysis. Children learn language by immersion. Social groups transmit norms through observation. Communities shape identity through shared narrative. Human beings absorb influence the way lungs absorb air, constantly, automatically, which means the environments surrounding a person gradually sculpt their internal landscape, beliefs, ambitions, limits, possibilities, all influenced by the signals that appear most often. This is why two individuals raised in different environments can see the same opportunity in completely different ways. One sees risk, another sees possibility. One sees limitation, another sees invitation. The difference is not intelligence, it is exposure. Exposure determines which narratives become believable. This is why ecology matters. If a forest receives sunlight, nutrients, and water, life flourishes. If those elements disappear, growth weakens. Human development works similarly. environments that encourage curiosity, expand possibility. Environments dominated by fear reduce exploration. Environments filled with comparison intensify insecurity. Environments rich in collaboration strengthen confidence. And in the modern world, influence ecosystems are no longer limited to physical communities. Digital environments have become powerful ecological forces. Ideas travel globally within seconds. Trends appear and disappear rapidly. Social norms shift faster than previous generations experienced. This acceleration multiplies the number of signals competing for attention, which means individuals are constantly exposed to influence ecosystems far larger than their immediate surroundings. This can expand perspective, but it can also overwhelm the nervous system. Too many signals, too many identities, too many possible directions. The result can feel like internal noise, competing narratives about who to become, what to pursue, what to value. This is why awareness of influence becomes essential, because once you recognize the ecology around you, you begin noticing patterns. Which voices dominate your environment? Which ideas repeat most often? Which behaviors receive the most approval? These signals shape your perception of reality, sometimes constructively, sometimes distortively, but always consistently. When influence ecosystems remain unconscious, they quietly program behavior. But when influence becomes visible, choice becomes possible. You can examine which environments nourish clarity, which conversations encourage growth, which spaces amplify comparison or anxiety. This awareness does not require isolation. Human beings thrive in community, but community should nourish development rather than distort identity. Healthy ecosystems create balance, encouragement without illusion, challenge without humiliation, perspective without pressure. In such environments, individuals grow stronger because the signals around them reinforce stability rather than chaos. The ecology of influence reminds us that hunger does not emerge from nowhere. Appetites grow within environments, meaning develops within culture, identity forms within relationship, which means one of the most powerful choices a person can make is ecological. Not only what they pursue, but where they pursue it, which conversations they return to, which environments they revisit, which voices they allow to shape their perspective. These choices accumulate over time, quietly sculpting the landscape of the mind. And once you see that landscape clearly, you realize something important. You are not only navigating hunger, you are cultivating the environment in which that hunger grows. And cultivation changes everything, because when the environment shifts, the direction of growth shifts with it. Up to this point, we have explored hunger through several layers: the hunger to be seen, the hunger for connection, the hunger for meaning, the hunger for legacy. Each of these appetites feels different on the surface, but beneath them, something unifies them. They are all signals pointing toward the same deeper human need: integration. Human beings are not designed to live as fragmented systems. The body seeks coherence, the mind seeks narrative, the nervous system seeks safety, and the spirit seeks direction. When these elements align, life begins to feel organized instead of chaotic. But when they separate, hunger multiplies, because fragmentation produces confusion. One part of you may chase attention, another part may crave solitude, one part may seek recognition, another part may seek purpose. When these impulses conflict, energy scatters. The result is exhaustion, not because the person lacks discipline, because the system lacks alignment. This is why understanding hunger matters. Each hunger we explored is not an enemy, it is information. The hunger to be seen tells you that your existence seeks recognition. The hunger for connection tells you that your nervous system requires attunement. The hunger for meaning tells you that your mind seeks coherence. The hunger for legacy tells you that your life seeks continuation. None of these drives are flaws. They are navigation tools. But when they operate unconsciously, they compete with one another. You might chase attention that does not produce connection. You might pursue achievement that does not create meaning. You might build visibility that does not contribute to legacy. This is the modern dilemma: abundance of opportunity, but confusion of direction. Integration solves this. Integration means aligning the hungers instead of suppressing them. Visibility used to communicate truth. Connection used to stabilize the nervous system. Meaning used to orient effort. Legacy used to guide creation. When these layers begin supporting each other, hunger transforms. It stops feeling chaotic. It begins feeling purposeful. Energy no longer scatters across every available stimulus. It concentrates, like light passing through a lens. Focus replaces noise. Direction replaces urgency. And urgency is one of the quiet distortions of modern life. Urgency makes everything feel equally important, every notification, every reaction, every opportunity. But urgency rarely produces meaning. Clarity does. Clarity emerges when you step back long enough to observe your own patterns. What drives you? What drains you? What nourishes you? What destabilizes you? The hunger dimension is not about eliminating appetite. It is about mapping it, seeing the architecture clearly enough to choose how you respond. Once you see the full map, something changes. You stop reacting to every signal. You begin navigating intentionally. Some invitations you decline, some environments you leave, some pursuits you deepen, because they align with the direction your compass has revealed. And the moment that alignment begins, hunger changes again. It becomes quieter, more focused, more useful. Not because the world becomes simpler, because you become clearer. Clarity is a form of nourishment. It reduces internal conflict. It allows energy to move forward instead of sideways. And forward movement generates something rare in modern life: momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence stabilizes action. Action builds meaning. Meaning feeds legacy. And legacy reconnects the individual to something larger than themselves. This is the full map of hunger, not a single appetite, but an ecosystem, a living system of signals guiding human behavior. The question is not whether hunger exists. It always will. The question is whether you are being driven by it, or learning how to navigate with it. And that distinction changes everything. Awareness changes something fundamental. Once you begin seeing the structures that shape your experience, the relationship you have with them shifts. Signals that once felt automatic become visible. Patterns that once felt mysterious begin to make sense. Influences that once guided behavior quietly now become identifiable. And once something becomes visible, it becomes difficult to ignore. This is the beginning of responsibility. Responsibility does not mean blame. It does not mean fault. It means the ability to respond with awareness. Before awareness, reactions happen quickly. Attention moves automatically. Emotions rise without examination. Behavior follows familiar patterns. But awareness introduces a pause, a moment where observation enters the sequence. And in that pause, something powerful appears. Choice, not absolute control. Life remains unpredictable, but the ability to choose how you respond to what you notice begins to expand. This is why awareness carries weight, Because once you see the architecture of your attention, your influences, and your identity, continuing unconsciously becomes harder. The mind begins noticing patterns as they happen. You notice when attention drifts. You notice when an environment destabilizes your focus. You notice when a conversation amplifies clarity or confusion. These observations create options. You can stay. You can leave. You can engage. You can redirect. You can reinforce what strengthens you, or reduce what fragments you. None of these decisions require perfection. Awareness is not about flawless behavior. It is about increasing alignment over time. Small adjustments repeated consistently. Choosing environments that encourage growth. Choosing conversations that expand understanding. Choosing actions that align with the direction you are building. Responsibility grows gradually, not as pressure, as stewardship. You begin caring for your own awareness the way a gardener cares for soil, removing what poisons the ground, protecting what allows growth, introducing conditions that support stability. This process changes how life feels. Instead of reacting constantly, you begin navigating. Instead of chasing every stimulus, you begin evaluating signals. Instead of scattering energy, you begin directing it. Direction creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence strengthens identity. And identity stabilizes the architecture you are building. The responsibility of awareness does not demand perfection. It invites participation. Participation in shaping the conditions that shape you. Participation in choosing which influences remain close. Participation in deciding how attention is spent. Participation in determining what kind of life structure emerges over time. This participation is quiet, often invisible to others. But internally, it changes everything. Because the moment awareness becomes active, life stops feeling like something that is only happening to you. It becomes something you are actively navigating, not controlling completely, but steering deliberately, and steering changes trajectory. Small adjustments in direction can reshape entire journeys over time. This is the quiet responsibility that awareness brings, not pressure, not perfection, orientation, the understanding that once you can see the map, you begin participating in how the path unfolds. Awareness alone does not transform a life. It illuminates possibility. But possibility becomes reality through practice. Practice is the bridge between understanding and embodiment. Without practice, awareness remains conceptual, interesting, insightful, but distant. Living deliberately means allowing awareness to shape daily behavior, not through dramatic change, through consistent intention, small actions repeated with clarity. Many people assume transformation requires a single powerful decision, a moment where everything changes. But most lasting change emerges through quieter processes, through patterns repeated long enough to reshape the architecture of the mind. Living deliberately begins with attention. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy flows, habits develop. And habits slowly construct the rhythm of a life. When attention is unconscious, habits form accidentally. When attention is intentional, habits form deliberately. This is the difference between drifting and navigating. Drifting reacts to circumstances. Navigation responds to direction. Living deliberately asks a simple question repeatedly. What deserves my energy today? Not every opportunity, not every demand, not every signal competing for attention. Only the actions that align with the direction you are building. This alignment does not eliminate uncertainty, but it reduces fragmentation. Energy becomes concentrated rather than scattered. When effort concentrates, progress becomes visible, even when movement is gradual. Deliberate living also involves rhythm. Human systems function best within cycles. Effort followed by rest, focus followed by reflection, action followed by integration. Without rhythm, effort becomes strain. Strain leads to exhaustion, but when rhythm exists, effort becomes sustainable. You move forward, then you pause, you build, then you evaluate, you create, then you integrate what has been learned. This rhythm allows growth to compound over time. Another element of deliberate living is environment. The environments you choose influence the behaviors that become easy. Some spaces encourage distraction, others encourage clarity. Some conversations drain energy, others generate insight. Deliberate living includes shaping the environments that surround you, not controlling everything, but choosing the spaces that reinforce the direction you want your life to move. This applies to physical environments, social environments, intellectual environments, and digital environments. Each one contributes signals that influence how attention moves. Living deliberately means becoming conscious of those signals and gradually selecting the ones that nourish clarity. Over time, these choices accumulate. They change how the nervous system responds to life. Chaos feels less overwhelming. Distraction loses some of its pull. Focus becomes easier to sustain. Meaning becomes easier to recognize. Because the architecture of daily life begins supporting the direction you care about. Living deliberately also includes reflection. Without reflection, experience passes quickly. Moments blur together. Lessons dissolve before they are understood. Reflection pauses the forward movement long enough to observe what has happened, what worked, what did not, what felt nourishing, what felt misaligned. These observations refine future choices. They strengthen the compass guiding your direction. The practice of living deliberately is not rigid. It does not demand perfection. It invites awareness into ordinary moments. Choosing where to place attention, choosing how to respond to influence, choosing what kind of structure you are building through your habits. These choices may appear small in isolation, but over time they shape identity, they shape opportunity, they shape meaning. A life rarely transforms in a single dramatic event. It evolves through thousands of small decisions repeated over time, each one slightly adjusting direction, until eventually the architecture of a life reflects the values that guided those decisions. Living deliberately is simply the willingness to participate consciously in that process, not forcing the future, but shaping the conditions that allow the future to grow with intention. And when that practice continues long enough, something remarkable begins to happen. Life stops feeling like something you are chasing and begins to feel like something you are building. When a person begins living deliberately, something subtle changes in how the future is perceived. The future stops feeling like a distant abstraction. It begins to feel like terrain, not fully visible, but navigable. Human beings are unique in their ability to imagine outcomes that do not yet exist. The mind can project forward, construct scenarios, anticipate consequences, design possibilities. This ability is powerful. It allows individuals and societies to build structures that once existed only as ideas, cities, technologies, works of art, entire systems of knowledge. All of these began as imagination interacting with intention. But imagination without direction can become overwhelming. Too many possible futures, too many paths, too many expectations competing for attention. This is where the horizon becomes useful as a metaphor. When you stand in an open landscape, the horizon marks the farthest point you can currently see. Beyond it, more terrain exists, but it is not visible yet. You do not need to see the entire landscape in order to move forward. You only need a direction. Step by step, the horizon shifts. What was once distant becomes immediate. What was once unknown becomes familiar, and new horizons appear further ahead. Life unfolds in a similar way. You rarely see the entire future clearly, but you can sense direction. Direction guided by the values you have examined, the environments you have chosen, the habits you are practicing, the architecture of identity you are building. Each of these elements shapes the path you walk, and as you walk it, possibility begins expanding, not because the world suddenly changes, because your relationship with uncertainty changes. Uncertainty stops feeling like an obstacle. It becomes part of exploration. Every meaningful discovery in human history involved uncertainty. Explorers crossing unfamiliar oceans, scientists testing ideas that had never been proven, artists creating forms that had not yet existed. Innovation always begins at the edge of what is known, which means possibility lives beyond certainty. The horizon represents that edge, a place where imagination meets action, where ideas begin moving toward reality. This does not require dramatic leaps. Most meaningful progress occurs through steady movement, observation, adjustment, experimentation, learning, then movement again. The horizon keeps shifting as you continue, each experience revealing slightly more of the landscape ahead. And as understanding grows, the range of possibility expands. Skills improve, perspective deepens, connections form, opportunities appear that were once invisible, not because they did not exist before, because you were not yet positioned to recognize them. Position matters. The environments you inhabit shape what opportunities appear. The people you encounter introduce ideas you had never considered. The experiences you accumulate refine your judgment. All of these elements expand the horizon of possibility. This expansion does not eliminate difficulty. Life continues presenting challenges. But challenges feel different when direction exists. They become part of movement rather than evidence of failure. Obstacles become information, signals guiding adjustment, and adjustment refines navigation. The horizon of possibility reminds us that the future is not something we wait for. It is something we gradually approach through action, through awareness, through deliberate living. Every decision adds another step toward the horizon you are moving toward. Every habit reinforces the direction of that movement. Every influence either sharpens or distorts your sense of what lies ahead. Over time, these small movements accumulate. Paths become visible where there once appeared to be open uncertainty. Meaning begins forming through experience. Contribution becomes possible through effort. Legacy begins taking shape through creation. And as each horizon is reached, another appears, not as pressure, as invitation. An invitation to continue exploring what becomes possible when awareness, attention, identity, and action begin working together. Because possibility is not a destination. It is the unfolding landscape of a life lived with intention. And the horizon will always remain slightly ahead, encouraging movement, encouraging curiosity, encouraging growth, step by step, choice by choice, until the journey itself becomes the architecture of meaning. When we talk about hunger, attention, identity, and meaning, it is easy to think in short timelines, days, weeks, months, but a human life unfolds across a much longer arc. Decades of experience, decades of learning, decades of adjustment. When seen across this longer timeline, many moments that feel overwhelming begin to change in scale. A single failure becomes information. A period of confusion becomes a phase of development. A difficult chapter becomes part of a larger narrative. The long arc of a life reveals something important. Growth is rarely linear. It moves in cycles, periods of expansion followed by periods of reflection, moments of certainty followed by moments of questioning, times of building followed by times of rebuilding. This rhythm is not evidence of instability. It is the natural structure of development. Every stage of life brings a different relationship with hunger. Early in life, hunger often focuses on discovery, the desire to understand the world, to test ability, to explore identity. Later, hunger shifts toward recognition, the desire to belong, to contribute, to establish a place within a larger structure. As experience accumulates, hunger begins changing again. The focus moves toward meaning, toward coherence, toward understanding how the many experiences of a life connect together. Eventually, another question begins emerging. Not only what have I experienced, but what have I built? What have I contributed? What continues beyond me? This progression is natural because human beings are not only consumers of experience, they are creators of structure, families, communities, ideas, stories, systems. Each generation inherits structures built by those who came before, and each generation adds something new before passing the structure forward again. The long arc of a life becomes meaningful when participation occurs, not passive movement through time, active engagement with the opportunities that appear across different stages. Some seasons emphasize learning, others emphasize creating, others emphasize guiding. Each phase contributes something essential to the whole. This perspective changes how temporary difficulty is interpreted. Moments that feel like setbacks may simply be transitions between phases, periods where previous identities are dissolving in order for new ones to form. Transformation rarely feels comfortable while it is happening, because the mind prefers stability. But growth often requires temporary instability. The long arc reminds us that no single chapter defines the entire story. What matters more is the direction that unfolds across time, direction shaped by awareness, by deliberate attention, by the environments chosen, by the values practiced repeatedly in life that created them. The long arc of a life is not measured only by achievements. It is measured by coherence, by the degree to which actions align with the values that guided them, by the degree to which a life helped stabilize the environments around it. A meaningful life does not require perfection. It requires participation. Participation in learning. Participation in building. Participation in guiding others when experience becomes wisdom. Every person travels this arc differently. Different environments, different opportunities, different challenges, but the structure remains recognizable. Experience becomes insight. Insight becomes direction. Direction becomes action. Action becomes influence. Influence becomes legacy. And the arc continues through those who encounter the structures you leave behind. This is the quiet continuity of human life. Not dramatic, not always visible, but always unfolding. Step by step, year by year, across the long arc of a life. Wisdom does not move the way information moves. Information travels quickly. It can be copied, forwarded, reposted, archived, and retrieved in seconds. Wisdom moves differently, more slowly, more quietly. It passes through attention, through experience, through timing, through the conditions that allow a person not only to hear something, but to recognize its weight. This is why two people can receive the same sentence and walk away with completely different outcomes. One hears words, the other hears truth. The difference is not always intelligence. Often it is readiness. Wisdom arrives when experience has prepared the internal ground for it to land. This is why human development depends not only on knowledge, but on transmission. A child learning from a parent, an apprentice learning from a craftsperson, a friend speaking honestly at the right moment, a meal shared with enough silence for meaning to settle. These are transmissions, not because they deliver perfect answers, because they carry orientation, they carry pattern recognition, they carry distilled experience from one life into another. This is one reason human beings gather, not only for company, for transfer, for the movement of insight across time. Cultures survive through this process. It reminds the nervous system that not every signal deserves the same response, not every feeling requires immediate action, not every hunger means the same thing. This is why wisdom can feel calming. It restores proportion. It reorganizes reaction. It helps a person distinguish between noise and signal, between appetite and need, between temporary desire and lasting direction. The transmission of wisdom does not always happen formally. Sometimes it happens in stories, sometimes in habits observed over years, sometimes in quiet examples of how another person carries themselves through difficulty. Wisdom is often absorbed before it is articulated. This is why environments matter so much, because every environment transmits something, a pace, a tone, a set of values, a way of interpreting what matters. The question is never whether transmission is happening. It is always happening. The question is, what is being transmitted? Fear or steadiness? Confusion or clarity? Performance or presence? Consumption or meaning? This matters because people become, over time, carriers of what they repeat. What you rehearse, you transmit. What you embody, you teach. What you normalize, you pass forward. Which means wisdom is not only what you receive, it is what you become capable of giving. And giving changes hunger again. Because once a person begins transmitting clarity, rather than merely searching for it, life shifts. They stop living only as a receiver of experience. They begin participating as a contributor to the architecture of other lives. This is one of the deepest forms of nourishment. To realize that what you have learned through difficulty may become useful to someone else, that the wounds you have studied carefully may become guidance, that the patterns you have decoded may become relief for another mind still lost inside them. Wisdom does not erase hunger. It contextualizes it. It allows hunger to become teachable, readable, shareable. And once that happens, suffering is no longer sealed inside the individual life that experienced it. It becomes material for compassion, material for clarity, material for transmission. This is how pain can become meaning without becoming romanticized. It is not celebrated, it is integrated, and what is integrated becomes available for use. That is the quiet dignity of wisdom, not perfection, usefulness, not superiority, steadiness, not domination, orientation. The transmission of wisdom is one of the ways human beings prevent one ritual, one story, one life at a time. The signal begins to quiet, not because the hunger has ended, because you have heard it. The hunger dimension was never somewhere far away. It was never a distant realm hidden beyond the world. It has always existed beneath the surface of human life, beneath appetite, beneath attention, beneath the quiet questions that move every mind forward. Every person who has ever lived has passed through this terrain, some without noticing, some searching for answers, some slowly discovering that hunger itself carries direction. Tonight you listened closely. You heard the language of hunger, the signals beneath recognition, the signals beneath belonging, the signals beneath meaning and legacy. And now the terrain should feel different, not silent, but readable. Because hunger was never meant to disappear. Hunger is motion. It is the force that pushes curiosity forward, the force that builds ideas, the force that drives creation. Without hunger, there would be no exploration, no art, no discovery, no desire to understand anything beyond the moment. Hunger moves life forward. But when hunger is misunderstood, it scatters attention. It pulls the mind toward noise, toward comparison, toward endless reaction. When hunger is understood, it becomes something else. It becomes orientation, a signal, a compass that points toward the next place growth might appear. Every person listening carries this compass: attention, awareness, choice, quiet instruments that shape the direction of a life. Used carefully over time, they reshape identity, they reshape environment, they reshape the structures that future lives will inherit. This is the quiet architecture of human existence. Not perfection, participation, each life receiving signals, each life transmitting something forward. And so the terrain remains open. The horizon continues moving, new questions forming, new hungers appearing, new meaning waiting to be discovered. The broadcast quiets, but the dimension does not close. It remains where it has always been, inside the restless curiosity that moves human life forward, inside the questions that appear when the noise fades, inside the moment when hunger returns and asks you to listen again. And when that moment arrives, you will recognize the signal. Because you have heard it before, the transmission quiets now, but the hunger dimension remains.